Welcome to ABC's Wide World of Sports. Today we'll visit England's historic and treacherous Grand National Steeplechase through the eyes of a daring jockey. And we'll get a report on last week's World Cruiser and Junior Heavyweight unification bout between Evander Holyfield and Carlos de Leon. And we'll see a grueling test of man and machine in the Baja 1000. For more on that, here's Paul Page.
This is the Baja. Warriors, men, ready to accept the challenge of one another and of their greater foe, the Baja itself. The dreamers, the designers, the explorers of this age come with their fragile creations. Ready to stand toe-to-toe with nature. To leave their mark in the sand as man and machine face the challenge of the Baja. Dawn in the fishing village of Ensenada, and the day is ready for the 20th running of the Baja 1000. It began with the motorcycles at 6:30 in the morning as 22-year-old Garth Sweetland began the run, the first to roll away. He led a stream of 67 motorcycles covering 4 different classes before a tiny crowd and over streets still damp from several days of rain. One by one, the riders began to roll away. The cycles would go first, then later the four-wheelers. Hello, I'm Paul Page, and the story we have to tell today is one of man and machine against one of the most rugged pieces of real estate in the world, and yet the strangely beautiful Baja Peninsula of Mexico. 29 different categories, a wide variety of vehicles, 304 different competitors leave the starting line in a staggered start. They leave every 30 seconds. Ahead lies over 704 miles, over 1,000 kilometers of some of the roughest road and, in fact, non-road in the world. Now, those who race it say it's tough. But our auto racing expert, Sam Posey, who has, in fact, driven the Baja, will add to that it's mean.
Exactly, Paul. I think what you learn here is how to deal with the unexpected. I mean, first of all, there's sudden weather changes out there. The course itself is so complex, it's very easy to get lost, especially during the night. There are many, many different kinds of terrain with which you have to deal. Quite often your machine breaks down, you have to fix it on the spot out in the desert. Communications are terrible, the radios never seem to work up there in the mountains. And lastly, the physical beating the drivers and riders take is so great that by the end of the race, some of them are having hallucinations. Now, the landscape, as you said, it is beautiful, but it is also forbidding and highly dangerous. And to taunt it with what you have to do to go fast enough to win this race is very risky business.
If you meet the challenge, and if you're one of the survivors, then hours from now, in the middle of the night, exhausted, you arrive back here in Ensenada. It's 8:15 in the morning. The town is now fully awake, and a menagerie of four-wheeled vehicles now lined up on the harbor road, ready to go. Bob Gordon, the defending champion in his class, unlimited engine size, 2-seaters, first in the line and ready to roll out. Crowd. Bob Gordon, the first four-wheel vehicle, is underway. Behind Gordon, each of the competitors, some with 2 on board, a driver and co-driver, others single-seaters ready to go the entire distance. Some drivers will drive the entire route. Others will change off. New drivers excited but worried. The veterans well aware there is much to worry about. And in this pickup, a Class 8 belonging to Frank Vessels, on board a fully registered co-driver, our own Jackaroo.
Jack, your thoughts now?
Just really, Sam, wanting to get through the start and find out what's out there.
What do you think it's going to be like when you first hit that rough terrain?
I really don't know.
They're at the start.
Go for it, buddy. On the start here, we're on open pavement. Very, very fast, but we've got a good, smooth ride. It's a great feeling to watch the crowd on each side waving you on. Getting ready for really the first part of the Baja 1000 out on the dirt.
Most of the top competitors, such as Frank Vessels, are relatively cautious on the pavement, which is only 48 miles of the total course, because the tires and suspensions of a truck like this are really designed for the dirt, and they don't give you much grip on the pavement. Plus, the road is open for traffic in both directions.
The pavement is a short-lived luxury. The real Baja lies ahead. On the course itself, Bob Gordon maintains his lead overall in the four-wheel divisions. Gary Pace rides with Gordon. The run courses its way out of Ensenada. Gordon is currently at Ojos Negros. The course is the same for the motorcycles and the four-wheelers. The terrain switches from mud to dust to sand, up across the Sierra Juarez Mountains, down through the washes and the dry lakes, into San Felipe, and then back west, across the Baja Peninsula. In the darkness, they run along the Pacific, and finally back into Ensenada.
Bob Gordon, who won this race in 1980, heading east from Ojos Negros, which in Spanish means black eyes. There are puddles in the sandy road, and Gordon, dodging them, is pushing hard. I always felt a flash of elation out here, the car in its element, running 100, 110 sometimes, the chill of dawn in Ensenada behind you, the sun up now, warming you.
On board with Frank Vessels and Jackaroo, already passing vehicles that left in front of them.
Frank keeps one hand on the wheel. With the other, he shifts the two speeds of his manually operated automatic. A muddy road, something rare for this part of the course, but remember, it's been raining out here this week.
The challenge of the Baja is not only of distance and terrain, but of altitude. They begin at sea level and climb to over 8,000 feet as the engines strain, and then back to sea level again, crisscrossing the mountains. Bob Gordon nears the summit.
Bob Gordon, his radio broken, must rely on hearsay information. At the last checkpoint, he has been told he has a 4-minute lead. And here, threading his way between the jutting granite rocks which can easily slice the sidewall of a tire, he is careful, willing to sacrifice some of the lead to avoid a flat. He worries about his oil temperature, which is running hot.
Frank Vessels approaches the summit. He's closing on the lead.
Vessels has passed 14 buggies and trucks that started ahead of him. He is third on the course and driving the sort of race you drive maybe once a year, where everything feels effortless, where your pace seems slow but your times are fast, and your monster truck, 5,000 pounds, 600 horsepower, dances over the terrain as lightly as Bob Gordon's buggy, which was half the weight and a third the horsepower.
Vessels' understanding of the Baja is extensive. So what is his strategy? What is his approach?
Well, it's the Baja 1000. You know, we're in these cars for 16, 17 hours, hopefully, maybe 20. I think year before last it took me 23 hours. and it's an adventure. It's a man against the elements, especially now with all the rain. You don't know what's around the corner. And it's the idea that I can tackle that race course faster than anybody else, hopefully, or at least the people in my class.
For this leg of the race, Jack Arute has been replaced by Frank's mechanic, Bill Anderhall. A co-driver watches his man carefully, especially when, like Frank, it's someone who plans to drive the entire distance without relief. The conversation is difficult and distracting, but Bill can tell that Frank looks good and he's found his rhythm.
Frank Vessels runs in third place, closing on the leaders. Out in front still is Bob Gordon, now 2.5 hours down the course. But just behind Gordon is David Chrysler, now closing on the leader, and like Frank Vessels, intends to run the entire route without relief. He drives a vehicle of his own design. The sun burns down on the Baja now. Temperatures rise into the 90s as Bob Gordon is 130 miles out, approaching Cohabuso Junction.
Gordon has asked his passenger Gary Pace to check for cars behind, but Pace fails to spot Chrysler, whose low-slung buggy is hidden by the bushes. Gordon pours it on, aware that at his next refueling stop, he will turn the car over to his co-driver, Malcolm Smith. He will have been at the wheel for 3 hours. This is what it is like at speed aboard the car of Bob Gordon. A violent, battering, up and down motion like a speedboat crashing through waves. The ride seems unreal because you know the car can't absorb this, and yet somehow it does. The oil temperature had risen to the critical point, and Gordon and Pace, without losing speed, have managed to remove the windshield in order to improve airflow to the engine. Within 2 miles, the temperature has dropped to normal.
But Bob Gordon is unaware that just behind and closing in now is David Chrysler. Chrysler is a familiar rival to Gordon. They both race this 10-race season of off-road. But does the Baja truly compare with the other events?
No, the Baja is my #1 race. I love it down here. It's just, you have all types of conditions here. You're going to have the Gulf side with possibly it could be 80, 90 degrees on the Gulf side, rain, and then rain on the Pacific side. It's just no otherwhere else can you race and come up with those conditions.
Is there any sense of kind of man struggling against nature down here in your mind, or do you see it just as man against man?
I see it as man against man down here. That's the way I attack the race.
It's high noon on the Baja. On the fastest part of the race course, Bob Gordon still leads. Just ahead lies the checkpoint at Tres Pozos, the 3 mines. Here, the officials will take down the car number and note the time of arrival so they can score the race properly. Gordon's pit crew has leapfrogged ahead to this point and waits for a regularly scheduled stop for Gordon just a few hundred yards beyond the checkpoint itself.
Gordon is ahead of schedule, and his relief driver, Malcolm Smith, who had hoped to be signaled of Gordon's approach by a ham radio operator, isn't ready. What should have been a 90-second stop drags on.
David Chrysler is not scheduled to stop. He roars past the machine as they are changing drivers between Gordon and Smith. David Chrysler now has the lead.
Chrysler is ebullient and feels like the Iron Man, proud of his toughness, his decision to drive the entire way without relief. It has handed him a tangible advantage.
Behind Chrysler at Tres Pozos, Malcolm Smith finally pulls away and begins his pursuit.
Smith, shaken by the delay and aware that he has lost the lead, streets after Chrysler.
But then suddenly Chrysler begins to slow down. He's had no warning of any problem at all. Like a wounded animal, Chrysler's machine goes lame and pulls up beside the road. Malcolm Smith, now replacing Bob Gordon at the wheel, can see his quarry ahead and roars past, back into the lead. David Chrysler climbs out to check his now blown engine. For Dave Chrysler and Curly Nobles, this Baja 1000 is over. Malcolm Smith now has the lead in hand.
In dreams I can fly.
Staggered start for the event. The winner is determined by the best overall time. The first vehicle across the finish line is not necessarily the winner. Right now, we rejoin Paul Page and Sam Posey.
45-year-old Malcolm Smith continues out in front, now in the mountains of St. Peter the Martyr in the Matomie Wash. Malcolm won the very first Baja. 6 times he has won, 3 times on a motorcycle. 4 times he has broken his leg. This is what it's like, traveling with Smith through the wash.
I can remember when Malcolm was building his reputation in the late 1960s, riding motorcycles. He was the guy that gave the whole Southern California off-road racing cult respectability by going to Europe and beating the best they had over there. He could do anything with a motorcycle. I remember that Steve McQueen, who loved to ride, worshipped him. When he suffered that 4th broken leg 15 years ago, he began to drive cars. And it was good. He could still win, but it was different. Some sort of magic that he had was missing, and he seemed to know it and not really seek the limelight. Like this ride today. Basically, Malcolm is a sort of ace reliever for Bob Gordon.
Malcolm Smith makes the checkpoint at San Rafael. And then the turn, now headed back north, parallel to the Sea of Cortez. Ahead is San Felipe. In the meantime, Frank Vessels is 25 minutes behind, still fighting the Matomie Wash.
Frank continues to build his lead over the other trucks, while at the same time falling back from Gordon and Smith. When the immediacy of competition fades, some drivers lose their edge. Frank seems to welcome it, and if anything, his concentration becomes sharper. Jackaroo is with him.
Still rocking and rolling here. By far one of the most demanding parts of this course, at least from this side of the truck. So far, it looks like there's been very little effect. No fatigue. Just working the truck to absolute maximum perfection. You don't think you get bounced around in these things even slowly? The bouncing's worse when you're slow than when you're at speed. At speed, you glide over the bumps. When you're this slow, you roll over each and every one of them.
Vessels can no longer challenge for the lead. And he has a new problem coming up from behind. Mark McMillan, in his unlimited single-seat buggy, is just 5 minutes behind and closing from third place. At San Felipe, the first four-wheel vehicle is now making its approach. Malcolm Smith continues his lead in the four-wheelers, heading out of the desert and into town.
Except for Ensenada, this is the only build-up area on the course. And after driving alone in the desert, when you see streets and houses and the kids waving you on, I always felt this great surge of excitement. I mean, I know it was foolish, they wave at everybody. For a moment, that human contact is wonderful. But you know something? Getting back in the desert is better.
Dusk falls on San Felipe. The fishermen are home. But for the racers in the Baja, there is still a long way to go. Darkness sweeps across the Baja. Frank Vessels now works his way west, back toward the Pacific. Running in third place, well behind the leaders. Into the darkness, into the mountains, into the cold. Night falls like a mantle over Ensenada as well. The bright beam of a motorcycle headlamp is seen approaching the finish line. So early, only a small crowd has assembled as Bruce Ogilvie comes to the end of his ride. Just over 12 hours, the first Baja competitor is in. Miles south down the coast, Bob Gordon approaches the checkpoint at Santo Tomas, still the leader of the four-wheel vehicles. He and his co-rider, Gary Pace, have been fighting a difficult power steering system. At Ensenada, Dan Ashcraft and Bruce Ogilvie can relax. At Santo Tomas, the wait is for second place. At the checkpoint at Santo Tomas, the wait for second place continues, just 80 miles from the finish line. A four-wheeler appears. But it's not Mark McMillan as expected. Instead, it's his father, 58-year-old Corky McMillan. And just behind is Mark. This family has been dominant in the Baja in recent years. In 1981, they finished first, second, and third overall. But the wait continues for Frank Vessels. There is no sign of him, and the radio reports are uncertain. Back at the finish line in Ensenada, the checkered flag is ready for the first four-wheeler. Lights appear down the highway. Bob Gordon, with the final roar of the engine, crosses the line. 13 hours, 15 minutes, and 4 seconds after the run began. He's averaged nearly 52 miles an hour. ignition is finally shut down. Now Sam Posey is there.
Still fun, Gary? Huh? Bob, still fun? How was it for you over the last section there?
Terrible.
You look a mess. The thing is all muddy. It's hard to even see the car.
Goggles fogged up, and I had to run without any goggles for the last 100 miles. The mud was just terrible. I don't know how we made it in. It was terrible.
Because of the staggered start, Gordon must wait to see if he has won. In the meantime, back at the checkpoint at Santo Tomas, Frank Vessels suddenly has appeared. His machine has broken down, and he's hitched a ride into town. But the breakdown, was it driver error or mechanical?
No, it wasn't a mistake. I was just driving down the road and just kind of made a real slight left turn there, and the thing just fell off. The wheel and spindle just fell off, and of course we went for a ride after that. The wheel and spindle went up through the trees. But it's just too bad. I feel bad for the crew and everybody. We really had it going today, and it's just one of them things, you know.
And what about his co-driver, Jack Arute?
My rookie co-driver did a wonderful job. He was relaxed. He didn't get sick. He really did a good job.
Jack Arute started the Baja as a reporter doing a first-person story, but soon felt the pull of this giant race and finished as a competitor.
This race started out for me as simply a chance to see the Baja 1000 from the closest of all vantage points. But by the end of the day, I'd ridden an emotional roller coaster that took me from the excitement connected with winning right down to the disappointment of not finishing. I was afraid at first, but once the race started, I was a competitor, wanting only to win. Didn't matter if I was being battered and bounced around in the truck. In fact, near the end, I began to not even think about that aspect because I was focusing on the fact that I could win this thing. And then it was over. We were out. We'd lost, and there was nothing that I could do about it. You know, it's odd in many ways because that losing makes going back to the Baja very important for me. You see, I think the Baja owes me one.
Back at the finish line, Bob Gordon has most assuredly won his class. But in order to be the first overall four-wheel vehicle, he must wait 17 minutes. The interval that Mark McMillan started behind him in the staggered start. Bob Gordon waits and watches.
How much more time?
30 seconds.
Thank you.
I never seen a clock run so slow in my life. There's no light.
Gary, we're getting closer for you. Get the company down. Closer. We're not going to get beat by no 5 seconds. 1,000 miles, would we?
Boy,
15 seconds.
I think we got it, Bobby.
10, 9, 8.
We got it.
7.
We got it.
6.
Nobody
5.
All right. All right.
3, 2, 1. 0.
As the moon rises and the night desert cold chills the Baja, good food, friendship, and music warm the winners. But still, far away in the night, others struggle on, as they will well into the next day. The McMillans would cross the finish line together. Mark McMillan would win his class. 314 began this odyssey. One by one, 134 fell away. 180 completed the run. For some, like Australian Jeff David, it would take nearly 30 hours, 17 hours behind the winners. But winning is, after all, not the only victory. The roar of the engine dies in the wind. The struggles of man, for now, are finished. The sun rises on the Baja, and the Baja remains as it has through the millennia, unaware of the passage of man.